I am Reed, I am 27, just an average dude. I've made tons of money mistakes in my 20s, and now I want to share everything I've learned to help you take control of your finances and your life. Alright, so let me start with a story. 2 years ago, I had this YouTube video I wanted to make. Nothing crazy, just a simple animation video with some graphics moving around on screen. I had this whole storyboard laid out in my head. I knew exactly what I wanted the final product to look like. There was just one problem. I had never opened After Effects in my entire life, not once. Now here's the thing. Most people, when they face that situation, they do what I used to do. They go sign up for a 40-hour course, they buy a book, they watch a bunch of beginner tutorials on YouTube that explain every single tool in the sidebar. They spend weeks learning before they ever actually try to do the thing they wanted to do in the first place. And then by the time they finish all that prep work, they've either lost motivation or they realize they forgot half of what they learned because they never applied it. I was guilty of this for years. In my early 20s, I wanted to learn how to invest. So what did I do? I bought 3 books on investing. I watched hours of YouTube videos about the stock market. I read articles about different strategies. I spent like 2 months preparing to invest without actually investing a single dollar. And when I finally did start, I realized that 90% of what I had learned was either irrelevant or had to be unlearned because the real world works differently than the textbooks. So back to the After Effects situation, this time I decided to try something different. I had this video deadline coming up. I had already promised my audience I would post that week, and I had a choice. I could either scrap the whole idea and make a simpler video, or I could figure out how to learn After Effects in the time I had left. I chose the hard route, and here is what happened. Instead of watching a tutorial on every single tool in After Effects, I opened the software and asked myself one simple question. What is the absolute minimum I need to know right now to make this one specific animation work? I needed to move a shape from point A to point B. That is it. So I Googled how to keyframe position in After Effects. I found one quick video. It was like 3 minutes long. I learned that one technique and then I did it. That first animation looked terrible. Let me be real with you. It was choppy. The timing was off, the easing was all wrong, but it was good enough for what I needed in that moment, and more importantly, I had actually made progress. I had done the thing, and that feeling of progress is what kept me going. The next day, I needed to add text that faded in, so I Googled how to animate opacity. Another 3-minute video, learned that technique, applied it. The day after that, I needed to make something rotate. You get the point. Within 2 weeks, I had stacked enough little techniques that I could create the full video I had in my head. Was I an expert? No way. Could I do everything in After Effects? Absolutely not. But I could do the specific thing I needed to do, and that is the whole point. Now, this is the first insight I want you to really understand. Skill acquisition is technique stacking. Everything you can do is a skill. I need you to let that sink in for a second. Everything you can do is a skill. That means if you want to get into a better relationship, that is a skill you can learn. If you want to make new friends, that is a skill. If you want to start a business, that is a skill. If you want to improve your career, your communication, your persuasion, your body, your mindset, any of it, it is all skills, and skills can be learned. But here is where most people get it wrong. They try to learn skills as a whole. They say, I want to start a business, and they try to learn business. But there is no such thing as a skill called business. Business is made up of dozens of smaller techniques. Marketing is a technique. Sales is a technique. Product development is a technique. Customer service is a technique. If you try to learn all of business at once, you are going to overwhelm yourself and quit before you even start. The same thing happens with playing guitar. If you sit down and tell yourself, I am going to learn guitar, you are looking at 5 to 10 years of study. There are tens of thousands of books, YouTube videos, articles, and people telling you the best way to learn. Your attention splits in a million directions and you feel paralyzed. But if you instead say, I want to learn how to play this one specific song in 2 weeks, suddenly the task becomes manageable. You don't need to learn music theory. You don't need to learn scales. You don't need to learn how to read sheet music. You need to learn the specific finger placements for the chords in that one song, and you can learn that in an afternoon. So the first step is always to start with the purpose. What are you actually trying to achieve? Not what skill do you want to learn, but what specific outcome do you want to create? Once you have that clear purpose, you can work backward and identify the exact techniques you need to make that outcome happen. And then you learn only those techniques, nothing else. Now here's something I need to address because I know some of you are going to push back on this when I say everything is a skill. Some people get uncomfortable, especially when it comes to things like making money or building relationships, because those things are tied to our ego and our self-worth and our survival. When those parts of us get triggered, all these distractions start popping into our minds. We start making excuses. We start blaming circumstances. We convince ourselves that we re the exception and that this stuff doesn't apply to us. I dealt with this too. In my early 20s, I was broke. I had debt. I was living paycheck to paycheck, and if someone had told me that making money was a skill I could learn, I would have laughed in their face. I would have said, well, you don't understand my situation, you don't know where I come from, I don't have connections, I don't have a rich family, I don't have a degree in finance. All of that was true, by the way. I really didn't have any of those things, but I was also using those excuses as a shield to protect myself from the uncomfortable truth, which was that I had never actually tried to learn how to make money. I had just assumed I couldn't. The Stoic philosophy talks about controlling what you can control. There is a lot in life you can control. You can control where you were born, you can control your family background, you can control the economy, but you can control your reaction to those things. You can control what you choose to learn, you can control how you spend your time, you can control whether you take action or stay stuck. And that alone gives you more power than most people realize. Now let me give you a more practical example of how this technique stacking works with something that actually matters. Money, if you want to make more money, you start with the purpose. What do you actually need to make money? Two things, something to sell and someone to buy it. That is it at the most basic level. Everything else is just technique stacking on top of that. So first you need something to sell. If you don't have a product or service idea, that is fine. You can learn how to come up with one. That is a technique. You research what problems people have. You look at what skills you already have that could be valuable to others. You combine your interests with market demand. That is a learnable process. Once you have your product or service, the next question is how do you find people to buy it? That is traffic generation. Another technique, you can learn how to post on social media, you can learn SEO, you can learn cold outreach, you can learn paid ads. There are multiple paths and you don't need to learn all of them. You just need to pick one and get good enough at it to make your first sale. Now here is where the mind gets in the way again. When you actually sit down to start building your product or creating your content, your brain starts feeding you all kinds of negative thoughts. What if nobody buys it? What if I am not good enough? What if people judge me? What if I waste all this time and fail? These thoughts are not facts. They read just noise, but they feel real because they read tied to your sense of safety and identity. And if you haven't trained yourself to observe those thoughts without acting on them, they will stop you every single time. This brings me to the second insight, progressive overload of the mind. If you've ever been to the gym, you know how progressive overload works. You don't walk in on day one and put 315 pounds on the bench press bar. That would crush you. You start with just the bar, then you add 10 pounds, then another 10, then 45. Over time, your muscles adapt and you get stronger. The same principle applies to your mind and your ability to focus. Most people try to learn too much too fast. They want to go from zero to expert in a week. And when they can't do it, they feel like a failure and they quit. But learning is a process. You build neural pathways just like you build muscle. Each technique you learn is like adding a small plate to the bar. It might not feel significant in the moment, but over time the compound effect is massive. Think of it like a puzzle. The full skill you are trying to learn is the completed puzzle image. Each technique is a single piece. When you first start, you might only have 5 or 10 pieces. You can see the full picture yet. But as you keep adding pieces, you reach a point where you can see maybe 40 or 50% of the image. And from there, you can start inferring what the rest looks like. You don't need all the pieces to be useful. You just need enough to start getting results. This is why I tell people that 6 months of focused effort can change your financial life. Not 10 years, 6 months. If you strip away all the noise and just focus on learning the specific techniques that directly lead to making money, you can get to 30 or 40% proficiency in half a year. And at that level, you can easily earn a good income. You don't need to be a billionaire. You don't need to be the NBA superstar of business. You just need to be good enough to be useful. And that threshold is way lower than most people think. Now let me be honest with you about something that tripped me up for a long time. Even when I understood the concept of technique stacking, I still struggled to actually sit down and do the work. I would get distracted, I would procrastinate, I would start one thing and then jump to another. My focus was all over the place. And that is when I realized there is a missing ingredient to learning fast. The third insight, pure focus. Pure focus is when you and the task become one. There is no separation between you and what you are doing. No thoughts about the past, no worries about the future, no checking your phone, no wondering what other people think. Just you and the skill you are trying to learn. Input and output merge. Every piece of information that goes into your brain is instantly transformed into action. You are not consuming content for entertainment. You are consuming it as raw material to build something real. Most people have never experienced this state, and I get it. We live in a world designed to destroy our attention. Our phones ping every few seconds. Social media algorithms are engineered to keep us scrolling. We re-surrounded by noise, but if you want to learn anything fast, you have to carve out space for pure focused work. Even if it is just 30 minutes a day, even if you have to lock your phone in another room, even if you have to tell your friends and family that you are unavailable during that time, it is worth the discomfort. Here's a trick that has helped me when I can get into that focused state. I call it tactical stress. And I know that sounds intense, but hear me out. Tactical stress is when you intentionally put yourself in a high-pressure situation that creates a strong deadline for achieving your goal. When I forced myself to learn After Effects in 2 weeks, I had a real deadline. I had promised my audience I would post that video. My income was tied to it, my reputation was tied to it, the pressure forced me to focus like nothing else could. Now, I am not saying you should quit your job tomorrow or put yourself in a dangerous situation, but I am saying that comfort is the enemy of growth. If you've been trying to learn something for months with no results, it might be because there is no real consequence for not learning it. The pain of staying the same isn't strong enough to outweigh the effort of changing, and so you stay in this idle state, just kind of floating along, never really pushing yourself. Think of it like testing your 1 rep max at the gym. You don't test your max every day. That would be stupid. stupid, but once in a while you put that heavy weight on the bar and you see what you are made of. In that moment, all your training comes together. Everything you've been working toward matters. And when you successfully lift that weight, you know exactly how far you've come. Learning works the same way. Sometimes you need to put yourself in a situation where you have no choice but to figure it out. Maybe that means signing up for a class that requires you to present your work. Maybe it means telling a friend you build them a website by a certain date. Maybe it means committing to a project that scares you a little bit, not so much that you panic, but enough that you rise to the occasion. I've done this multiple times in my own life. When I wanted to learn how to edit videos, I started a YouTube channel and told people I would post weekly. That forced me to learn editing fast. When I wanted to learn how to invest, I started with a small amount of real money. Not a simulation, real money that I would feel if I lost. That forced me to pay attention and learn the fundamentals properly. When I wanted to improve my speaking skills, I started recording myself and posting it online where people could critique me. That forced me to get better fast because the embarrassment of being bad was worse than the effort of improving. Now I want to bring this all together for you. Technique stacking breaks down any skill into manageable pieces. Progressive overload of the mind ensures you build those pieces sustainably without burning out. And pure focus combined with tactical stress gives you the intensity you need to accelerate the whole process. When you combine all three, you can learn almost anything in 2 weeks. Not master it. I want to be clear about that. Mastery takes years, but you can make substantial progress in 2 weeks. You can learn enough to start getting real results, and for most people, that is the hardest part. It is not the advanced stuff that stops us. It is getting started in the first place. Once you cross that initial barrier, everything gets easier because you have momentum. Let me give you a concrete example. Say you want to start a side hustle. You have no idea what to do. You are overwhelmed by all the options. 2 weeks is enough to research profitable niches and pick one. 2 weeks is enough to create a simple landing page or social media profile for that niche. 2 weeks is enough to create your first piece of content or offer. 2 weeks is enough to reach out to your first potential customer. In 2 weeks, you can go from zero to having something real in the world. And that something real is way more valuable than any course or book you could consume in that same time. Or say you want to learn a new language in 2 weeks. You can learn the most common 100 to 200 words. You can learn basic sentence structure. You can learn how to introduce yourself and ask simple questions. You want to be fluent, but you be able to have a basic conversation. And that basic conversation opens the door to real practice, which is how you actually get fluent. Or say you want to improve your physical health. In 2 weeks, you can establish a consistent workout routine. In 2 weeks, you can clean up your diet. In 2 weeks, you can start sleeping better. 2 weeks is enough to build new habits that will serve you for the rest of your life. The problem is most people don't believe 2 weeks can make a difference. We recondition to think that meaningful change takes years, and sure, major transformations do take time, but momentum doesn't. You can build momentum in 2 weeks, and once you have momentum, the whole game changes. I think about my own journey a lot. When I was 23, I was broke and lost and had no direction. I was living month to month with no savings and no plan.